I've had a lot of different businesses here on my farm, but far and away, the most profitable business we have had has been growing trees. You know, on this farm, we have raised cattle, we have raised pigs, we've done ducks for meat and eggs, we've done geese for meat, we've sold fertilized duck and goose eggs, we've sold chicken and chicken eggs. And aside from the social media stuff, the trees that we grow on our farm are by far the most profitable thing that we can do.
Thus creating the self-sustaining economy we've been looking for.
That's right.
How does a self-sustaining economy work?
I don't understand how the U.S. economy works, much less some sort of a self-sustaining one.
And when I look at how much money I've made from growing trees over the last couple of years, based on the number of hours worked as well as the amount of revenue I've generated, it works out to be about $500 an hour. And it doesn't require acres and acres of space, and it doesn't require a lot of money for investment. I mean, heck, my entire tree nursery operation fits in about a half an acre's worth of space. And if I was really crunched for space, I could probably do it in even less. The only skills that this tree business actually requires are the ability to be planful and think about the big picture and be consistent and do certain steps at very specific times of year. Be a tiny bit savvy in terms of how you think about promoting, marketing, and selling your product. And then it takes a little bit of know-how, which I will share with you guys throughout the course of this video. And no, this is not one of those scammy influencer things where I'm trying to sell you a course or a membership to my Substack or some sort of how to get rich quick type of book. The only book I've ever written is a children's novel about my dog and farm. I am only making this video because I am a guy who believes that the world needs more trees and it needs more people growing trees. And I hope some folks out there see this video and get inspired, but I do make a tiny bit of money from you watching this video, so just note that. And the only things I'm gonna ask in return is that you watch this video until the very end and don't just follow my advice. Let this video be your starting and jumping off point, and from here, do your own research and figure out your own business plan, because what's gonna work for me is probably gonna be a little bit different than what works for you, both based on your skills, as well as your market, as well as your climate. So just keep that in mind. Good morning, large white farm dogs. I've got some visitors with me. We're doing a farm tour today. And not really a full farm tour, but a tree farm tour. Like I said, we raise ducks and geese and chickens and cattle and pigs and goats here on our farm. You can see our waterfowl hanging out in the morning in their water pools. This is Toby dog and this is Abby dog, and they're the security detail on our farm because the birds actually free range 24/7 in the summer months. And so they keep the coyotes and bobcats and foxes away. And I'm just dropping off some fun forage for the goats. But if you want to have a tree farm, the first bit of advice I can give you is don't have goats. They're horrible for trees. They love to eat and kill trees. And if you do have goats and tree farms, you need like basically a penitentiary to keep your goats from escaping. You know, the very first thing I did after purchasing this farm was to start making the plans to put the trees in the ground so that we could have essentially a permanent orchard here on the farm to produce all sorts of fruits and nuts for us to consume, as well as to potentially feed to our livestock. And even when I was still commuting up here to the farm from living somewhere else in the country, after the first year of ownership, I actually made sure to put the trees in the ground, because the advice people have with planting trees is the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but the second best time to plant a tree is right now. And so for all of you aspiring tree farmers out there, I hope you follow that advice first and foremost. And so yeah, here we have what I like to call the permaculture orchard. It's a design of my own making, based on this idea from a guy by the name of Stefan Sobkowiak. He's an orchardist who's up in Quebec. And the idea is it's interplanted different species of tree where you have none of the same tree next to each other. That way you're able to promote more orchard diversity and prevent a lot of various pests and plagues that might hurt your trees. And so the trees that we have in here mostly these days are a mix of chestnut, mulberry, apple, and black locust. There's a few other things like walnut and butternut scattered throughout here, but those trees right there have been the most successful for us here on the farm. And as you go down the rows, what you're going to find is that I have an apple tree right there, I have a chestnut tree right there, I have a black locust tree right there, and that pattern will repeat itself all the way down the row. And it was actually the process of getting this set up that first sent me down the rabbit hole of researching how to sprout my own trees, because a lot of the trees that you'll see out here were trees that I bought 7 years ago. And when you buy trees to plant them yourself on your property, you'll find that they're rather expensive. But meanwhile, I had this friend by the name of Akiva Silver who had all of these crazy different ways for sprouting trees. And so he taught me a lot of his methods, and a lot of those methods I'm going to show you guys today were things that he taught me. And if I could ask for anything, it would be that you guys take those methods and use them and even pass them on to other people. Because like I said, I do believe the world needs more trees. Now, the trees that I sell on my farm are what's known as bare root trees. That means that they're not like big, full, large, mature trees like you might buy at like a Home Depot or a garden store. They're basically just little sticks that you see poking out of the ground. Like here's actually a year-old black locust seedling that I'm probably gonna pull up and give to somebody. And so the shape of my tree business is I'm typically starting most of my seeds in the fall, like this time of year right now as I record this in November. And then in the late spring, I take the seeds that have sprouted and I put them in garden beds so that they can be harvested. And then I let them take the entire summer to grow and mature to get to be, I don't know, about something like this size right here. But once they've achieved that size, I pull them out of the ground, and that's when I typically will box them up and ship them to people. Because the other crazy thing about my tree business is most of the customers for my trees are actually not even in my area. They're pretty much all over the northern portion of the United States. But because of the nature of a bare root tree, you can actually package them appropriately and ship them pretty easily. Over the past few weeks, I've gotten through all of my shipping process, where I'm basically taking these bundles of bare root tree seedlings and I'm like packaging them up, and I wrap their roots in a little bit of plastic so that they don't dry out. I also add a tiny bit of wet sawdust in there. And then I'll take that box and I'll ship it to the customer. Like, you know, one of the most magical things about the tree business that I have is the fact that I will probably clear about $13,000 this year in revenue. And that's only through about, I don't know, I think like 25 clients or so. It's not a lot of people that I'm selling to. But the thing that I do is I only sell in bulk. And so the bare minimum number I have for ordering my bare root trees is 25 tree seedlings. And so that means I keep my customer support hours low. That means I keep the amount of time it takes to box and ship and package everything pretty low. And that's part of the way that I'm able to earn about $500 per hour from this tree business. Because the hours of this business are as follows. It's about an hour or two in the fall to get your seedlings started. It's a couple of hours in the spring to get your seedlings set and into garden beds. It's only a couple of hours to take care of those seedlings over the course of the summer with maybe a little bit of watering and weeding if necessary. And then the bulk of your work is going to happen at the end of the season when you're pulling those seedlings out of the ground and you're packaging them up and you're doing your shipping. And that is one of the key secrets to the success of this operation is it doesn't take a lot of time over the course of a year. It's just a little bit of work consistently over the course of 1 year versus when I think about things like raising cattle or chickens or ducks or geese, they require so much more consistent daily labor that those hours add up in a way where those types of businesses will never ever be nearly as profitable as it is to grow trees. And while my farm here is about 160 acres, and the area that takes up the permaculture orchard is, I don't know, just a little less than 10 acres, it's like 9.5 or so, you don't need a lot of space because most of my growing operation basically fits in about 1/2 acre's worth of space. Like, I'll go down to the lower part of the farm in a little bit and show you exactly what I mean, but I know the first question you guys are gonna have is,
hey Morgan, that all sounds great, but where can I get my seeds from?
And well, my friends, that's a very good question, and I am about to show you. So right here contains a box of chestnut seed that I am going to use and sprout over the next week or two. And now I know you guys are gonna ask where these seeds come from, and I'm not going to tell you, and that is gonna be one of the few secrets that I gatekeep from you in this video. And that's only because I know if I tell everybody, they're gonna get inundated with orders, and then when it's time for me to order my seeds, I won't be able to get them.
I need my nuts, man, for a lot of things.
And so yeah, I'm keeping this a secret. But yeah, here's about 15 pounds of chestnut seed, and to show you what it looks like, it's like this stuff here. I usually either buy the really large ones or the seed grade quality ones, which are more likely to sprout. But this is what a chestnut looks like. And this is probably, if I was gonna say you should start with any type of seed, this is probably the one I'd pick. Maybe the other one I'd suggest is apple, which we'll talk about in a minute. And the reason I suggest starting with chestnut and apple is because there's a bigger market for it. Black locust is a little bit more complex and a little bit more of a niche audience that you're gonna be selling to. Pretty much everybody understands the value value of a chestnut tree, and absolutely everybody out there understands the value of an apple tree. And when it comes to particularly people who might be hunters who are looking to figure out ways to add various plants to their property to attract more deer or turkey or bear or whatever, apple and chestnut are just phenomenal crops to start with, and they're really, really easy to grow. To start a chestnut seedling, all I'm essentially doing is taking these guys and I'm putting them in a bucket of sand. I dampen that sand, and then I just put layers and layers of chestnuts and sand, chestnuts and sand, chestnuts and sand, until I've pretty much filled the bucket up about 2/3 of the way. And then I will take that bucket and I will bury it underground right around this time of year, right before the ground starts to freeze. And I'll leave it in there, and then I won't go get them until, I don't know, I usually wait until about Memorial Day before I pull up my chestnut seedlings. And when I pull up those chestnut seeds, you find that most of them have sprouted, meaning they have like grown like a little tail, and you can see that they look like there's like a little baby tree just starting to form. And once you have those little chestnut seeds sprouted, you're gonna have a sense of how many trees you're gonna grow over the course of that year. That right there is a big reason why I wait until like the late spring and into the summer before I start taking orders from customers. Only because I don't wanna try to sell inventory I don't have. And I grow a lot of these seedlings to help actually put trees here on my farm. And I don't wanna shortchange myself of trees by growing trees for other people. This bucket method tends not to work if you're in too warm of a climate and you don't have a cold enough winter. But if you don't use the bucket, the other thing you could do is put your seeds in a bag in the refrigerator. Back when I was living in Washington, D.C., I did that method as well. And while it works fine, I don't think it works as well. I think you're much more likely to get like mold or funguses or sort of problems like that springing up when you're growing them inside the fridge. And so I tend to prefer the natural outdoor method. But again, if you're constrained on space or if you're in a climate that's too warm, a refrigerator is an acceptable option as well. The germination of the bucket method of sprouting chestnut seedlings is really good. I found that somewhere between 92 and 97% germination for my chestnuts over the years when I use the bucket method. Much, much better than the refrigerator method. Now, if you're growing chestnuts, the biggest expense you're gonna have is the cost of seed. And, you know, it can be a little bit pricey, which is again why I'm a little bit guarded about where I get my seeds. I end up getting my seeds from a whole variety of locations though, because I want to have good genetic diversity here on my farm for future seeds. Because my long-term plan is for my own chestnut trees to get mature, and then I can sell those seeds to other people as well. I know, and me even just saying that makes this whole video feel like a little bit of a pyramid scheme. I wouldn't be telling you that information if I didn't think it would actually help you, and it wasn't just about buying tree seedlings from me. Or I'm probably going to start selling seeds in 2026 or 2027. But if you can't get your hands on chestnuts, the other crop that you can start with is apple trees. And apple trees around here in northern Vermont grow like weeds. And right here you guys are looking at what will probably end up being about 1,000 apple trees that will appear, I don't know, probably this spring. I actually don't even spend any money on my seedlings. When we make apple cider here on the farm, we typically have lots of pulp left over from pressing down the apples. This pulp contains a lot of the fibrous material of the apple, but also if you dig through here, and I'm just gonna dig through this piece in a second, even though it's kind of frozen, what you'll find is there's lots and lots of little apple seeds in here as well. And so the mashed up apple bits serve as a wonderful compost and fertilizer for starting your apple seedlings. And just because it's the way nature works, those seeds are gonna sprout this spring and they'll grow and grow and grow. And eventually I'll pull out a little bare root seedling like this one that I can then box up and just, you know, be very careful of the roots at the end of it. But I'll basically bundle these up and box them up. And that's the product that I'll usually ship come late October when the trees go dormant. You see, the timing of this whole process is very intentional because typically with most tree seedlings that are deciduous, what you're gonna find is you'll have trees that go dormant once you start to have a lot less daylight and once the weather starts to get colder. And so as the leaves die and they start to lose their leaves, like actually most of these apple and pear trees right here all have lost their leaves for the season. And so now, as this tree's out here like this, it's dormant. And that means that as long as I didn't damage the root ball, I could just pull it up out of the ground and move it to somewhere else in the farm if I wanted to. And when springtime hits, it's ready to just start growing. And so that's why I'm not selling trees in the summer months and I'm only selling them in the fall, because that's when they're easy to ship and they're easy to transport, and it makes it easier for me to pull them up and it makes it easier for the buyer to then plant them. Over the years, people have written me frustrated emails because I refuse to sell trees in the summer, and that's when they want to put the trees in. But nature doesn't work to your schedule, and you're always much better off if you work to nature's schedule instead. Now, one criticism I know I'm going to see pop up in the comments of this video is the fact that, you know, when it comes to apple seedlings, apple trees never grow true to seed, meaning when you have an apple seed, it's going to have a whole mixture of genetics, and those genetics are going to actually prevent it from being true to what its parent was, and that's 100% true. What I do is I sell my apple seedlings as wild rootstock, meaning it's a rootstock that is going to grow like an apple tree and should actually be pretty hardy, but the type of apple you're going to get from it could be really anyone's guess. Sometimes it could be wonderful, sometimes it could be awful, sometimes it'll be a great eating apple, sometimes it'll be a good cider apple. You just don't know. And so actually the reason why I have trees like this one back here is I grow these trees just basically for scion wood, meaning later this winter I'm going to probably cut off this tree branch right here and I'm going to graft it to one of my apple seedlings, and then that's going to make a better variety. So like this tree is a Northern Spy variety of apple, and so that means every part of the tree seedling above the graft is going to produce like this tree right here and give me those good Northern Spy apples. And so for most folks, rather than try to spend, I don't know, like $30 at a local garden supply store for a type of apple tree, my customers are typically spending $5 or $6 for an apple seedling that will either produce apples that are just fine for deer, or they can take those seedlings and they can do their own grafting and they can make some wonderful varieties. Now, in terms of taking those seedlings and growing them, when it comes to the chestnuts, I will usually take them out of the bucket and then I put them into seed beds. What I've found works best is what are known as air pruning beds, meaning they're garden beds that are set up off the ground maybe about a foot or so, and I use hardware cloth on the bottom of those beds. And what that hardware cloth does is it will make sure that the roots don't grow too deep, which makes it much easier to pull the trees out of the ground come fall when I need to ship them and sell them. And I'll typically do the same thing with the air pruning beds for the black locusts. When it comes to the apple tree seedling beds, I usually just leave them in the ground right here and I'll yank them up come the fall. This area that we're standing here on the farm is kind of where I have my various beds that are in rotation. In the name of being efficient and in saving on the labor, that's why I don't bother replanting the apples after they sprout. I think they're just better off being left to be and in letting nature run its course and then pulling them out in the fall. I don't usually have any problems with like root breakage, which is one of the risks. Now, another question I've received over the years is how I do the marketing. And again, this might be where I might be a little bit different than what will work for you. Basically, by making videos like this one, people find me and then that's when they email me through my website, and that's eventually how we hook up and I sell them tree seedlings. But if I was starting from scratch and trying to figure out how to market my tree seedlings, I think the couple of things that I would do is probably post on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. I think I would also try to reach out to your local gardening and permaculture communities, because you're going to find a high demand for cheap tree seedlings for folks who are trying to do permaculture projects or gardening projects or just people who want to grow their own food. And I think another wonderful market for you to dig into is like your local hunting and sportsman club type groups. So groups that are focused on, you know, hunting deer and turkey especially. I think the more you can connect up with them, you're going to find more people who have land that they're trying to develop for better hunting. And one of the best ways you can improve your hunting quality on your farm or property or woods or whatever you got, like a woodlot, is to actually have trees that bear fruit and nuts. And in our climate here in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom, nothing grows better than apple trees, and chestnuts actually do pretty darn well here too. And so they'll make for great options. If you're selling locally, you don't need to do anything to ship them. I would just suggest like bundling them up and then maybe wrapping the roots in like either a wet paper towel actually, no, not a wet paper towel, like a mildly damp paper towel. You don't want it to be too wet. Either you wrap them in that or maybe some damp sawdust, which is what I typically use, and just a plastic bag. And you don't want to seal it airtight around the roots because you want it to be able to breathe a little bit. But what's going to happen is it's an easy way to ship it. I wouldn't store trees like that for too long. Like they only store for about, I don't know, a week or so like that. And typically what I will recommend for clients is when they get the trees from me, what they should do is just take the whole clump of trees and just dig a little tiny hole and put it in the ground temporarily until they're ready to put the trees in their site. I wouldn't leave them like that for any longer than 2 or 3 weeks, but if you do that, what you're gonna find is it actually helps sensitize them to where they're at and gets them ready to be planted individually, like spot by spot. The US Postal Service actually has like a bulk shipping box that you can use that's kind of long and almost perfect for a tree seedling. The tree seedlings I'm selling are usually less than 24 inches long, and so as long as you have a box that's that long and isn't too big and bulky so you're not paying extra for shipping, it works out pretty well. Based on the way I typically do shipping from the farm, I have a pretty easy way to calculate what sort of box and weight I'm gonna have based on the number of trees. And so I just pass that cost on directly to the client. And so you don't see shipping costs show up in my breakdown of costs and expenses, because I just like pass it directly to the client versus trying to factor it into my business operations. Again, the name of the game here is low effort, low cost, low overhead, and just keep it really simple. And if you can do all of those things, you just might have a profitable tree business. Now, for folks who are wondering about the expenses and breakdown on costs, I haven't done my final numbers for 2024, but I'm gonna share with you guys some stuff I have from 2023. The average selling price was $9 for a chestnut, $6 for a black locust, and $6 for an apple tree. I did about 550 chestnut, 400 black locust, 425 apple. That got me nearly $5,000 in revenue from chestnuts, 2,400 from black locust, and 2,500 from apple. The cost per unit is basically the expenses for that entire tree crop divided by the number sold, and so it was 89 cents or so for each chestnut seedling. The reason it was that 89 cents is it's a tiny bit of materials, but a whole heck of a lot is wrapped up in the cost of the actual chestnut itself. The black locust and apple, because I'm able to just harvest them here on the farm or get them from neighboring places for free as just a waste product, that's only about 15 cents per tree that it cost me to do it. And so my profit on the trees for last year was a little bit under $10,000 based on both an increase in price as well as an increase in the number of trees I grew. I will be a little bit over that. I think it's about 12,000 that I'm targeting. And for each year, it's only been about 20 hours per work now that I have my system down to a science. And so as I look at it, that's where I derive that $500 per hour for it. I think the one thing you need to be careful for is there is not necessarily an infinite market for trees. And so because of that, you have to think about what other businesses you're gonna have with your homestead or farm. But as far as side hustles go in these lean times that we now live in, I can't think of a better business than trying to grow trees for people. I hope you guys found this video useful, and I really hope it inspires other people to want to start growing and selling trees. If you have questions, drop them down in the comments. I'll try to do my best to answer as many as I can. Or if you guys really like this video, maybe I'll make a follow-up just answering all of the questions that pop up. But yeah, best of luck growing your trees, my friends.